talk today is on the genus of snakes, Drymarchon. And encompassed in that are indigo snakes and Cribos. And they're all kind of essentially the same snake, just from different areas and slightly different paint jobs and colors and things. But the most well known is the Eastern indigo snake, which is native to the southeast part of the United States, and it is an endangered species. And so that's kind of the iconic snake for the large family of snakes that we call colubrids, which are non-boa, non-venomous type snakes. So I got into them about 10 years ago or so. I had aspirations of, I'd always kept snakes since I was 2 years old, and I had aspirations of breeding them. I used to go out and catch a couple gopher snakes, and I'd throw them all in the same cage when I was a kid, and the males would combat and they would breed and they'd lay eggs, and I'd hatch the eggs and I'd take the parents and the babies and put them back where I caught them, kind of a thing, and I thought it was kind of fun. And then it was, can I get some captive bred snakes to breed, and maybe snakes that I could buy, and I started with that. I started off with Honduran milk snakes and all the different morphs and things that come with the Honduran milk snakes, and that was kind of fun for a while. And then I noticed these black-tailed Cribos, which is related to the Eastern indigo, kind of came onto my radar as, a 7, 8 foot, 9 foot long snake that acted like a cobra but wasn't venomous and was tame and intelligent and a good pet. And so I bought myself a pair from a local breeder, and a few months after that, the breeder called me and said he was having some financial trouble and offered me a pair of the adults. And so I quickly snapped them up, and that just started a craze obsession on my part. And I know there are a few people in the room who own indigos and Cribos, and I think you can kind of understand where it came from. But so that's kind of where it all started, and I immediately had success breeding the black-tailed Cribos, and then I would sell the babies. And so it kind of started off as, well, this is kind of neat. I can make a little bit of money to help pay for my mice and my rats, which can get pretty expensive. If you're familiar with indigos and Cribos, they can eat a lot. Mm-hmm. And so then I sold a few, and then I had some money left over, and I thought, well, let me go buy a different type of Cribo. And I bought some yellow-tailed Cribos that were imported from South America, and I quickly learned that imported snakes can be a pain. So I invested in captive bred ones, and then I just sort of, all the money that I would get from the babies, I went and bought more, and next thing I know, I had a garage full, and I had to figure out the odor problem, and we worked on all that. So so now I've got a whole room full of different indigos and Cribos, and so rather than have a slideshow or something, I brought them all, not all of them, but to kind of show you a little bit about what they're about. So there are 6 major subspecies of the Drymarchon genus that are commonly seen in the pet trade, and so I brought an example of each. There are others that are around in Mexico and in Venezuela and some places, but they're generally not found in the pet trade. So anyway, they're all mostly tame. Except for when they're hungry. And in fact, I was a little late coming in here because my biggest and in fact tamest Eastern indigo, he's got a very aggressive feeding response. And if you're going to get bitten by an indigo or a Cribo, it's usually because they mistake you for food. And so this particular snake will bite anything that comes into its cage until I get it out. And once I get it out, it's incredibly tame and docile animal. Anyway, just an hour ago when I opened the cage, he bit his tail and wouldn't let go. And I'm sure some people in the room have seen king snakes and some other snakes do this. One of the things that we'll get into when we're talking about the Drymarchon genus is that they don't constrict when they kill their prey, and they're not venomous either. They just have really, really strong jaws, and they're very powerful. Big, sharp teeth, really tough, strong jaws, and whatever they bite, they do serious damage to anyway. So I was doing some emergency veterinary work before I came here. He cut himself open pretty well. anyway, so this is a black-tailed Cribo. This is what got it all started for me. And so obviously they get their name because of the black tail. Some of the other identifying characteristics is that they'll have this sort of neck stripe on the side of the neck there. And they've got this sort of markings on the face. And with the Drymarchon genus, males and females are what we call sexually dimorphic in that there are differences in their appearance and or size. And the males get larger than the females. A lot of the boid species, it's the other way around. But with the Drymarchon genus, males get larger than females. Most of my snakes, the males will average somewhere between 7 and 8 feet, and the females are more like 6 or 7 feet. This is an adult male. This is one that I actually hatched out 5 years ago, and I actually sold him when he was a baby, and to a guy that he was a family pet for, and I was able to reacquire him back, and his name that was given by his old family was Max. And so he's since been come back and is part of our breeding program, and has sired some nice clutches and whatever else. So black-tailed Cribos are native to Central America. They're found in southern Mexico and can range down into Costa Rica. And they'll generally occupy kind of wetter, marshier areas. And what's neat about these, and really any of the Drymarchon species, is that they will literally eat anything. Anything they can fit in their mouth, bite, crush, and overpower, they'll eat, and it really doesn't matter. So we're talking about, the usual rodents, birds, lizards, things like that. But they'll also eat, young crocodilians, baby turtles, doesn't matter, they'll eat it. Fish, frogs, it doesn't matter. So, which is really kind of fun as a keeper, that you can feed them various things. And once you start kind of experimenting with varying the diet, I've definitely noticed that the snakes tend to grow better, their skin tends to look better, they tend to be happier animals when you're giving them more than just lab rats. I do a lot of field herping as well. And so, I will collect dead snakes that I've seen in the road or something like that. I'll freeze them for over a month to make sure that any kind of parasites are killed off. And I'll feed them to my snakes as a way to vary their diet. And they love it. And it's kind of interesting that they've got a very aggressive feeding response towards rodents, but when you see them go after, a 4-foot rattlesnake, or whatever else, it's kind of apparent that they really prefer other things. So, but my standard meal for any of my indigos and Cribos, my adults, is a small rat and a chick. Chicks are readily available in bulk, frozen, and so they make for good meals. I also do some nutritional supplements as well, but that grows them happy and healthy. So, black-tailed Cribos. Does anyone have any questions about black-tailed Cribos? I'm kind of envisioning more of a, interactive forum kind of thing, and asking and answering questions as I go with all the various snakes there. Yeah, Darren?
Humidity requirements?
What I do is, admittedly, they require more humidity than Southern California can really give. So my snakes are generally a little on the dry side than what they get in the wild.
Okay.
And so, but the way that I combat that is with humid hide boxes.
Okay.
And they'll use those.
Okay.
In the driest parts of the fall, they can, especially I occasionally have weird snakes that don't use the humid hide boxes when maybe they should. But for those of you that don't know, I get big Tupperware bins. I put them inside their cages. I cut a hole in the top and I fill it with damp moss, and they'll go in and they'll use that. But outside of that, I don't do any misting or anything like that.
Okay. No negative side.
No. Yes, sir.
What kind of jaw pressure do they have if they're able to crush prey before they consume it?
Well, I can tell you I haven't measured it, but I can tell you I felt it, and it's not good. I generally, avoid getting bitten. There are a few things that I do to kind of combat that, and I learned it the hard way. One of my eastern indigo snakes bit me a few years ago, and I was gone for a week on a vacation, and I came back, I fed them, and I checked inside their cages to see if they had eaten. Well, I keep my snakes in a rack system, and the snake in question was about this high off the ground, and I opened up the tub and looked in like that. I just saw a flash of gums and teeth, and it hit me right on the nose. And I can show you pictures on my phone later, but it was profuse bleeding, and really shredded it pretty well. And I didn't really feel anything necessarily, just I pulled back and it didn't clamp on, it just pulled back. But they've got very strong jaws. Did I have a, yes ma'am?
Yes, I was wondering, when you feed them roadkill, have you noticed a discernible difference in behavior when it comes to venomous versus non-venomous?
I have found I do have some of my captive snakes that prefer not to eat other snakes, but I've not really noticed a preference towards one type of prey of snake as opposed to another, venomous or non-venomous. I've fed them king snakes, gopher snakes, glossy snakes, rattlesnakes, just about anything. Interesting side note is that I did, in fact, this snake in particular, I noticed once after feeding a large adult Mojave rattlesnake that I was cleaning the cage, and in cleaning the feces, there was an actually fully intact rattle in the feces. It digested the whole snake, but for some reason it didn't digest the rattle. Interesting though. Yes, sir.
Do they know if they eat venomous snakes in the wild?
They'll eat anything in the wild, absolutely. So in the wild, they're eating fertilances. They're eating, literally anything. They have no qualms. If they can kill it and fit it down their throat, they will eat it. I know that they eat venomous snakes. I don't know that anyone has actually studied the effects of venom on the Drymarchon genus, but really any of the members of the Drymarchon genus, from eastern indigos all the way to yellowtail cribos in Argentina, will eat venomous snakes. That was a different snake. That one's still at home.
How did you treat it?
Well, it was a quick job as I needed to get here, so it was really it was just washing the wound out and really treating it not too differently than you would treat a human wound. In that I'd fill up the wound with a triple antibiotic and fill up the wound with the cream, and then put it in a place where substrate can't get in there. So we'll talk about substrate in a bit, but. So I put them in a big bin that just had newspaper, paper towel in there, so there wouldn't be any kind of dust or particles that would get into the wounds for now. When I get home later, I'll assess it a little bit more, and I don't think the wounds are large enough to require sutures. I have needed that in the past, and we can talk about that when we get to breeding. But I think it'll be okay. That lives in Central America is the unicolor Cribo, which is this one, which is very similar to the black-tailed Cribo. So this one is Drymarchon melanurus unicolor, and they get their name because the top half is a lot more close in coloration to the bottom half. It's not as contrasting. Other than that, it really looks like the same animal, and it kind of is. There are different subspecies of the same area. One of the things that indigo and Cribo people debate these days is the difference between a unicolor Cribo and a black-tailed Cribo. In that unicolor Cribos have more of a kind of a brownish tail, and you'll see some where the top half of the body looks exactly like the bottom half of the body. You'll see some where it's a little brown. You'll see some where it's a medium brown and some of a light brown. So there's really all kinds of degrees in between a unicolor Cribo and a black-tailed Cribo. So with that in mind, people debate as to, are they truly distinct separate subspecies taxonomically, or are they just different color variations of the same animal? So with that in mind, My partner and I, we did a little bit of research and we looked at some museum specimens in the LA County Museum. And we looked at ones that came from Central America, and we looked at snakes that were found within the accepted range of the blacktail Cribo, and they had tails that looked like this. Some were black, some were brown. We looked at snakes that were from the accepted range of a unicolor Cribo, and we saw some tails that looked black, and we saw some that looked brown, which sort of led us to the conclusion that there isn't really a whole lot of difference between a blacktail and a unicolor. They're really the same snake, just different color variations of the same animal. So that's where we are. As far as the pet trade goes, people sort of identify them with just the look. A blacktail Cribo has a black tail, and a unicolor Cribo has, not a black tail. And again, that can be anywhere from dark brown, light brown to, a straw yellow. So this snake here is one of our breeders. I like him because he kind of has an orangish hue to the yellow on the top half. And he sired some nice clutches for us. So on the subject of breeding, and I figure I can just throw in some captive notes as we're going through each of the subspecies. The Drymarchon genus, they're winter breeders, whereas most snakes are spring breeders. Generally speaking, most snakes, you'll hibernate them through the winter, you'll warm them up in the spring, and they breed in the spring in legs and so forth. What these guys do is they'll breed when it starts getting cold out, at the beginning of the winter, which is generally now. In fact, just last night I was pairing up some of my snakes to see if they were ready to breed yet. And we're not quite there yet. We're at the very beginning of the breeding window, but most of my breeding happens in late November and in December. So with that, kind of the timetable is if they breed in late November and December, then they'll end up laying eggs generally end of March, early April. The incubation period for the eggs is much longer than a lot of other snakes. Kind of the typical with most colubrids, corn snakes, and king snakes is about 60 days. With the Drymarchon genus, it can tend to be anywhere from 90 up to 120 days. I also incubate them much, much cooler than you would most other snake eggs. Most snake eggs, you generally have them about 80, 82 degrees. With the Drymarchon genus, you want to be more like 75. And with lower incubation temperatures, you tend to end up with longer incubation periods. But it works out in that the babies tend to be a little larger, a little more robust, a little more well-formed. If you incubate them too warm, they'll often come out with birth defects, spinal kinks, and they'll be smaller and more difficult to get feeding when they're first born. So, any questions about the unicolor Cribo?
What is the range in the wild?
Yeah, that's what I was going to
It's really the same as the blacktail. They're just kind of different coasts. If I'm thinking of it correctly, I believe that the unicolor is more on the west coast of Central America, and you're talking from southern Mexico down into the northwest corner of Costa Rica. And the blacktail Cribos are from the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico down on the east coast through Belize and all of that. So it's really kind of the same area, just different sides of the continental divide there.
So one Pacific, one Atlantic.
Right, one Pacific and one Atlantic. But then again, in my opinion, they're really the same snake. I have no, scientific proof of that, but just in what I see and, what I've observed with them, that's kind of where I am with it.
No DNA testing or anything so far?
To my knowledge, no one's really looked at it. And I've, talked with a few grad students that are looking into, trying to find a paper to do for their doctorate and whatever, and I've suggested that. So I would love to see it if it were to ever come up, to someone really, to have someone take a look at it. But, that kind of, sparks a whole debate about taxonomy to begin with and how valid is it to really have subspecies. In a lot of areas, they're doing away with a lot of subspecies and a lot of different kinds of snakes these days.
Is there any difference in, habitat from east to west coast that might account for variability in the snake?
Generally speaking, the East Coast is a little bit more wet than the West Coast. I don't know that that accounts for the difference in coloration or the way they look. But again, you'll when you look at the museum records, you'll see snakes that look like West Coast snakes, and you'll see them on the East Coast, and vice versa. So I'm not sure how to really account for that. This is a Texas indigo. And obviously with the name, the Texas indigos are native to the southern tip of Texas. However, most people don't realize that they range well far down the east coast into Mexico. The scientific name here is Drymarchon melanurus again, but this is Arabenus, which is again the Texas indigo. So Texas indigos can be pretty variable in their coloration, but they tend to be a blackish snake, and they can have some sort of mottling on the top, which can be sort of a brownish coppery color. And the side of the face tends to be kind of a brownish coppery color in the Texas indigos. That's one of the ways to distinguish them from eastern indigos. The tip of his nose looks a little raw. When you put him in pillowcases, they'll sometimes push hard enough against the side of the pillowcase to rob their nose a little bit. The other factor that will sometimes vary in the appearance of a Texas indigo is the color of the throat. And that can be anywhere from a black to a white to a brown to a yellow to an orange to a red. And so, but I would consider this snake right here a fairly typical representation of your average Texas indigo, but again, they can vary. So, this is an adult male, albeit a small adult male, and he's sired some nice clutches for us, and hopefully he'll be breeding again here soon in a few weeks. So they are protected in the state of Texas. You cannot collect them out of the wild. However, they're fairly common in the pet trade in that before they were regulated against, that people would collect them in the wild and keep them and breed them and sell the offspring into the pet trade and so forth. So, as far as I know, I haven't heard of a whole lot of issues with poaching or anything like that with people taking snakes out of the wild. Part of the reason why they're protected in the state of Texas is that they occupy a very small geographic space in the state of Texas. It's really just the southern tip, although they're very common in that space. And all the way down, and again, their range goes all the way down the east coast of Mexico. So they're certainly under no threat of being endangered or going extinct or anything. Their populations in the wild are very strong and healthy, and that they have a very large geographic range. But generally speaking, in the United States, if we have an animal that might be very common, but it only occupies a very small geographic area, then the typical sentiment is to protect it. And in this case, I actually think it's a pretty good idea in that, this is a sought-after snake, and it's better to leave it where it is in the wild. And this sparks a whole other debate, but, that's one of the benefits of captive propagation, is that if there are snakes that are sought after as pets, if they can be obtained relatively cheaply in the pet trade, then that relieves the pressure of taking the animals out of the wild. And that's certainly been some of the case with these guys. So take our local king snakes, for example. It used to be, before they were protected, that you could sell them for a couple $100 each. And so if you know what you're doing, you go out and collect 10 or 15 in a day. It's a nice paycheck, but now you can buy them in the pet trade for $20. It's not worth any poacher's time to go out and do it, but I think a similar kind of thing is true with these guys. So they still command a pretty high price tag. Texas indigos generally sell for something around $700 or $800 each, but their populations are really strong in the wild. And as we breed more of them, and as they're more in the pet trade, the price tends to come down as supply goes up, and that relieves some of the pressure from the wild. That didn't really have anything to do with Drymarchon. It's sort of my little soapbox there. Yes, sir.
How does their habitat compare to the previous two Cribos, the unicolor and
Blacktail?
Yeah, the unicolor and the blacktail are a bit more tropical, whereas the Texas indigos are not quite as dependent on that humid climate. They do tend to be found around, and I've actually never looked for them in the wild. I would love to someday, just to be able to observe one in the wild. But they do tend to gravitate towards water, and that's not quite as much of a humidity thing, I would suspect, as it is just a prey thing. Because again, they'll love to eat fish and frogs and whatever else, birds, anything they can find around the edge of water and so forth. But not specifically, they don't need to be found near water, but from what I've heard from people that have looked for them, that they're often found around waterways and so forth. So,
Are they ambush predators at all?
generally speaking, and I think you probably, with the exception of this guy who's chilling out, they're very active snakes. They move, and they move a lot. So I would not classify them as an ambush predator. They're going to tend to want to search, forage, chase down, kill and eat their prey. They're generally pretty agile animals. They're inquisitive. They generally have pretty good vision, which is usually indicative of a diurnal or a daytime hunter that's going to be actively foraging rather than sitting and waiting for prey to come by. I can't imagine these guys doing that. They're very active animals. Anyone else, Texas indigos?
Yeah.
I do not give them any kind of natural light. It's just artificial light, and I do have a window in my snake room, so they get, but I would imagine they're not getting any kind of UV rays from that. It's more of just, and I think that helps with the cycling of breeding is just the photo period. They sense the longer days and the shorter days, and that kind of regulates their cycle a little bit. So, yeah, being able to have that natural photo period, the natural seasonal changes, really helps cycle them. You kind of discussed with the preferred prey of adults. Because they're such prey generalists in the wild and they'll eat anything, babies can be difficult sometimes. With being as aggressive feeders as they are, that's kind of surprising to some people. But what happens sometimes is that the babies are sort of hardwired to prefer one sort of prey rather than another. And so for a breeder, that can be difficult because, if you have a baby king snake and it doesn't want to eat, you can be pretty certain if it doesn't want to eat rodents, it wants to eat lizards. But with indigos and cribos, you just don't know. It could be that they want frog. It could be that they want fish. It could be that they want lizard. It could be that they want birds. So there's a little bit of trial and error, and there's a little bit of exploratory work with that. You get a certain amount of them that want mice right out of the egg, and that really helps. But sometimes they don't want mice, and they just won't eat. They just flat out won't eat. So what you tend to have to do is feed them fish, frog, or lizard, or something, until they get that feeding response kind of clicked in. And then, this is not an uncommon technique really with a lot of different kinds of snakes, but you'll do what's called scenting, which is where you'll take a baby mouse and you'll rub it with a lizard, you'll rub it with a frog, you'll rub it with a fish or whatever, get that scent on the baby mouse, and the snake will try to eat that. And you do that 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or however many times, and then they'll start eating the rodents on without any of the scenting. So generally speaking, with indigos and cribos, 3 or 4 meals that are scented, and then they'll start eating just about anything you throw at them.
But
So
does it have to be moving?
sometimes yes, sometimes no. That's another part of it too. It's obviously a lot easier for a breeder if I can buy rodents that are pre-killed and frozen in bulk. I don't need to be running to a pet shop or breeding my own mice, heaven forbid. But sometimes they want to see something wiggling, and other times it's just a scent thing, and they see something in there and they want to go eat it. But that can be one of the more challenging things about the Drymarchon genus is care of the babies. So this is the Eastern Indigo. So this is the one that we talked about at the beginning of the presentation. This is the endangered species that is native to the southeast part of the United States. The reason why I'm able to own an endangered species is that before they were regulated, before they were protected, people used to collect them out of the wild, and they would breed them and sell the babies into the pet trade. And so for several decades now, I believe it's in the 70s, the eastern indigos were protected by not only the states where they live, but the federal government as well, and labeled an endangered species, so you can no longer take these out of the wild. And that's obviously very good for protecting our wild populations. One of the bigger issues on their declining populations in the wild is habitat fragmentation and the destruction of their habitat. One of the species of animal that they cohabitate with are gopher tortoises. The indigo snakes will often live and utilize gopher tortoise burrows, and they'll sit outside the burrows and they'll go down in the burrows and whatever else. So they have kind of a specific habitat that they like to occupy in the southeast, and as we build roads and build houses in that specific habitat, they have a hard time doing what they need to do. They have been known to have a very large range. They will travel quite a bit, so they need large tracts of land, which is kind of in opposition to some other species of snake, like our local king snakes, for example. They don't tend to move very far at all. Same with rattlesnakes, but these guys can move quite a bit. So, anyhow, obviously the protecting of the animal is great for protecting the wild populations. It did have a negative effect on the long-term health of the species, in that one of the issues that we have with breeders of eastern indigo snakes is that because you can't take them out of the wild, that the genetic diversity in the pet trade is very shallow. And what happens is that as people breed them, they're being bred to second cousins or siblings or whatever else. And what has happened over a few decades of this going on is that there's started to become issues. And those issues can be birth defects. Those issues and the birth defects can be spinal kinks. They can be malformed scales. Sometimes enlarged hearts are common. You can see in a baby that's born, there will be a bulge right in the middle of the chest, and you can actually see the heart beating through the belly scales, and it's usually fatal within the first period of its life. So, and that's kind of happened because of inbreeding. So, on one hand, eastern indigo snakes are very common. There are hundreds of them in the pet trade. But on the other hand, they're the health of their genetics is not in good shape. And so I don't know what the answer is, because obviously we need to protect our wild populations, but at the same time, they're being very well captively propagated. They're not in danger of going extinct anytime soon, but they are starting to have these issues with inbreeding. So as an indigo breeder, one of the things that is incumbent upon me is to make sure that I've got a diverse breeding stock as much as I can. So I won't ever breed a sibling to a sibling or a cousin to a cousin, and I take a lot of care to try to backtrack the history of where the grandparents of my animals came from, and the grandparents of as far as I can track it anyway. And any snakes that I sell into the pet trade, I provide as much pedigree information as I have to my buyers, so hopefully we can avoid this inbreeding issue as much as possible. But it's a real problem. It's a real problem. So legally, it is legal to own them. It is legal to possess them, unless you live in a state where they are native. So Georgia, Florida. However, you need to have very extensive permits to export them out of the United States. It's extremely difficult. I mean, if you're not a zoo, you're not going to be able to do it really. And otherwise, the way the law is that if I want to sell an eastern indigo to someone who lives out of state, out of California, then there needs to be a federal interstate commerce permit, which allows you to ship an eastern indigo snake across state lines. And that it's $100, and it involves a 2 or 3 month wait while you're waiting for a piece of paper to get processed. And once that's done, you're free to ship an animal, an eastern indigo, across state lines. None of the other indigo or Cribo species are regulated like that, just the eastern indigos. So, you know, there are a lot of people who, you know, want to get eastern indigo snakes and breed them and make money and sell the babies and get rich and all this sort of business. And there are a lot of issues to think about if you're, you know, aiming to do that. Inbreeding issues being one of them. The other issue that I didn't mention earlier with the inbreeding is that it's also difficult to get fertile eggs. It's a lot more difficult. So it's not uncommon for, you know, a female indigo to lay 6 or 8 eggs that are all slugs or infertile eggs, and you end up with no babies and that kind of thing too. So it's not the kind of thing necessarily that you want to go into lightly if you're an aspiring breeder. But, you know, so they come with their issues. But that being said, this snake in particular is a very iconic snake as far as being large, intelligent, tame. They, as you can see, they don't sit in your hands like a ball python would. They tend to be a little bit more inquisitive and interactive. And, you know, I've known people that, I knew a guy that would take his indigo snake out and sit on his back porch every evening, and it would sit on his lap. And it would sit on his lap and enjoy the sun, and then it would crawl off of his lap into a flower pot, go to the bathroom, and crawl back into his lap as if he was a dog.
Wow.
And, you know, they've got that sort of personality, and if you work with them long enough, you can kind of see that that they have moods. You know, they'll look at you and they'll peek around and they'll huff and they'll puff when they're frustrated at something or whatever else. So they're really neat snakes, and their reputation is very well deserved. Not without their issues, but they're really neat animals. So, questions on eastern indigos? Yes, sir.
Being endangered, do you have to report the babies bred?
I'm sorry?
Being endangered, do you have to report the amount of babies that are bred?
You do not. You do not. And I don't know why that is. It could be something you could do. You have something on that, Mike?
Yeah, back to the Texas indigo.
Yes, sir.
Are they not federally protected?
The Texas indigo is not federally protected.
Okay, so that's
It's only protected in the state of Texas. So I can buy, sell, own Texas indigos. As long as I don't take them out of the wild in Texas, I'm good. I can import them, I can export them, I can do whatever I want. Eastern indigos, that's not the case. So,
With such a strong feeding response, do you have to keep them separate unless you're breeding?
oh yeah. Yeah, I have heard of people keeping them together from birth and that kind of thing. To me, that's a risk. It's a big risk. There are periods of time, periods of the year when they're not quite as hungry as others. In the heat of the summer, they're just ravenous, and they will literally eat anything. And I would absolutely not house them together. Breeding time is obviously when you're putting snakes together. And I've never had an instance where I had a male try to eat a female or vice versa. But what I will have, and this is very common with a lot of different snakes, king snakes will do it and whatever else, but the males will sometimes bite the females during the courtship when the male's more aggressive than the female wants to be, kind of a thing. And with the jaw strength and the teeth of these guys, it can cause some damage. And so I didn't really have very many issues with that for several years. And last year, for some reason, something in the air, but the males were biting the females quite a bit. I had 2 different females that had to have sutures and get sewn up, and there's some big gashes in them. Yeah, it's really breeding time is the only time I put them together. And even then, I do watch them, you know. But it's less that they're trying to eat each other, and more that it's just the males biting the females during courtship. You know, and if a king snake does it, it's not going to hurt anything. But if an indigo bites something, it's going to damage it. Male will do during breeding time is track the female by putting his face on top of her body, and then sort of track along and settle up somewhere over here on top of her. And if she's trying to move and get away and that kind of thing, he'll bite, you know, somewhere here in the neck to kind of hold her down, kind of thing. But But if they're really an aggressive breeder and the female's not ready yet, you can have bites anywhere. The eastern indigos, and really indigos and cribos in general, you keep a little bit cooler than a lot of other species of snake. They'll get stressed out if they get too hot. So one of the keys to successful keeping of an eastern indigo, they're really, really hardy snakes as long as you don't mess up two things, and that's temperature and that's water. As far as water goes, they'll drink more than most snakes. They'll drink more in a week than most snakes do in 6 months. So a constant source of fresh water is essential. Of clean, fresh water, that's absolutely essential. One of the best ways to get a snake messed up and sick is to have dirty water. But they'll dehydrate very quickly. On top of that, you also don't want their temperatures to get very hot. Whereas you can put a boa, a rosy boa or something at 90 degrees on the warm side of its cage, that'll kill an eastern indigo. They need to be kept more like 80 degrees. I like my ambient temperatures to be in the mid-70s. And then I do provide a warm spot on the warm side of the cage, but it only goes up to 80. Anything more than that, and they'll stress out, which can be a difficult thing in Southern California in the summertime. When it's 110 degrees out for that, that 1 week of August when it's just blistering, and it's a room inside the house, and so he's able to climate control the room perfectly. And he keeps his room at 78 degrees, and he doesn't provide any heat at all. So they're 78, they don't cool down, they don't warm up, and that's what they are, and they thrive.
That's year-round?
And that's, well, no, he does allow it to cool a little bit in the wintertime.
Okay.
Cooling for the Drymarchon genus is different than other snakes. Like a king snake or a corn snake, if you wanted to breed one of those, you're generally going to put them into the 50-degree range and keep them that way for a few months and then warm them back up. With these guys, you don't need that much of a drop. I just sort of let my garage get cool, just naturally with the Southern California weather, and it just kind of takes care of itself. The eastern indigos I found though, we talked about kind of poor fertility rates as a result of the inbreeding. I have found though that I can increase fertility rates significantly with some slight tweaks to the cycling and the husbandry, and one of that is I get my eastern indigos cooler than everything else, significantly so. I'll get them down into the 50s, whereas everything else would be down in the 60s. And they'll be active, and they'll be eating, and they'll be breeding in the 50s, but I'll let the nighttime temperatures get down into the 50s, and I'll let the daytime do whatever it's going to do, and they tend to have a lot more fertile babies out of it.
Okay.
So I'm still working on that. Every year I get another round of data to kind of help me figure out the most effective ways to breed eastern indigos. One of the knocks on indigo snakes and the Drymarchon species in general, genus in general, is that they've got very fast metabolisms. They poop a lot, and that it's stinky, nasty, liquidy, grainy, and they don't lay it, they spray it, kind of a thing. And so that's where a lot of people hesitate in getting these as pets for that reason. And it's smelly. So what I've tinkered around with different things over the years. There's a keeper specifically that keeps them on newspaper, and literally every time they poop, they disinfect the cage, and that's just. And if you work with them enough, they can poop every other day. I mean, if you have a big boa constrictor, it's once a month. But these guys, it's frequent. So, that's not me. But what I've finally settled on over the years is that I'll mix aspen shavings that I get from a feed store that's chopped very, very finely. And that helps. I worry about them accidentally swallowing shavings while they're eating a rat or something and it getting impacted in their intestinal tract. So I use very finely chopped up shavings, but then I'll also mix into it. It's called stable blend, and they're pellets. They're wood pellets that people use in their horse stables, and they're very, very. They absorb liquid very, very well, and so when liquid hits it, they just sort of turn to sand and kind of granulated stuff. And it really absorbs the liquid, and it really absorbs the odor really, really well. So putting those two together, it's called stable blend. So I get it right near your house. I get it at Cahoots
Oh, okay.
over there. But it's I believe it's pine. It's compressed pine, and it's in pellets, and I buy big bales of it. And that's really, for me, has kind of been the key for controlling the odor. You know, and as far as the humidity issue that was raised earlier, it's kind of counterintuitive with that, in that it's sort of designed to subtract humidity, whereas the snakes can sometimes need the humidity. So, you know, I have to make sure that I'm on top of the humid hide box to give it that sort of humid option. So, last one. This one here I save for last because he's my favorite, and he's also kind of the least tame. The temperament, captive care of really all of the 6 commonly kept Drymarchon species is really similar. They're all pretty tame. They're all pretty active. Their temperature and humidity requirements are all pretty similar. If there's one that kind of varies a little bit, it's this one, and this is the yellow-tailed Cribo. Their range is enormous. They'll go from Venezuela all the way to Argentina, the entirety of South America, pretty much. And the scientific name is Drymarchon chlorice. It's their own genus, or I'm sorry, their own species. And they tend to be a little bit more slender, a little bit more active, and they're a little bit more prone to be defensive. You're really hard-pressed to get any of my snakes to bite out of defense. If they're going to bite you, it's because they're mistaking you for food. But the yellow-tailed Cribos will occasionally get defensive in their cages. So this guy I've worked with a lot. I've had him for years. And so you can see already his mood a little bit. But and you can see kind of that personality. They'll sometimes puff up their necks a little bit when they're unsure about something, or they're getting defensive. And so they're longer than you think. And they're active. Wow. I mean, he's not going to sit in your hands like a boa. And when you're handling a really wild one of these, you need space. I had one that I had imported I bought it as an import from South America years ago, and it was larger than this one. And when I wanted to handle them in the garage or move them around, I had to move my wife's car out so I would have space.
How big do they get?
Records have been up to 10 feet.
What's this?
I don't know how long this guy is exactly. I can tell you that I'm 5'8" and my reach is 7'2". So he's my longest Drymarchon.
How old is he?
And let's see, I got this guy as a baby 7 or 8 years ago. Thereabouts.
What is their lifespan?
They can live up to a good 25 years. Getting that.
Is there a certain window of time for breeding?
I've heard of Indigos and Cribos being bred well into their 20s. I'm sure like anything else, there's a period of time towards the end of their lives where they stop being interested in breeding. But I haven't really seen or heard of that. When they're older, they'll get cataracts, and they'll start moving more slowly and start growing out instead of long and that kind of thing. But yellow-tailed Cribos, I'm really kind of fond of. They're just a little bit more spicy.
Is there any species in the genus that happens in Panama?
Panama. That's a good question. I think if there were any, I believe there are yellow-tailed Cribos in Panama. I know that they're in Venezuela. In fact, there was a new species that was described relatively recently in Venezuela of yellowtails. I know that there are some that live on some of the islands off the coast of Venezuela, so you're not far. But I would have to look that up. So, yellowtails are a lot of fun.
Which one of these 4 get the largest? This one here, or?
These guys have got the record for length, yellowtails.
And that's 10 foot?
Right. But again, I've kind of seen in my captive collections that they're all pretty much the same. Again, this guy's my longest snake. He's not necessarily my thickest, but he's my longest snake. And again, males larger than females, and most of my males are somewhere in the 7 to 8 foot range. But there have been blacktails that have been recorded at 9 feet. Eastern indigos too. Really, all of them, all of them are pretty comparable size. If there are differences, it's not by much. So, yeah.
So you said that your garage is your snake room?
Yes.
Do you actually use the garage?
To park in?
Yeah.
Used to, not anymore.
Oh, okay.
That's full of snakes. My wife said no snakes in the house, but keep whatever you want in the garage. So I took her to her word. Filled it up. Is there another question on yours? Yeah.
Is that a Guyana or is it?
This is a Guyana. The question is that in fact, I believe all of the countries in Central America are now closed to exportation of animals, and so you don't really get wild-caught blacktails or yellow or unicolors being brought into the pet trade. But there are still countries in South America that are where it's legal to export wild-caught animals, and the two where most shipments that come into the United States come from are Guyana and the other is Suriname. So a lot of the snakes, the obscure, type snakes that you see coming in through importers in Florida and whatnot, tend to come from those two countries. So with that in mind, there are a lot of wild-caught yellowtail Cribos that have come into the pet trade. And I learned very quickly to avoid that situation. A, for temperament. I mean, some of those adult wild-caught yellowtails, wow. And then B, just for health. They often come in full of parasites. And in addition to that, we discussed the sensitivity to dehydration. When you're buying a wild-caught snake that's coming from South America, you might know the person you're buying the snake from, but you don't know how many hands and how much time passed from the time that the snake was captured to the time it ends up in your garage. And so it could be that some local caught the snake, kept it in a box for a few weeks, and then gave it to a farm there in South America somewhere, and then picked up by an importer, and it could have had several weeks, months of inadequate water. And so what will happen often is that you'll get a seemingly healthy yellowtail Cribo, and it'll just suddenly die on you a month after you have it. And the reason is that there will be organ damage due to the dehydration, the repeated dehydration. And even though the snake can kind of seem fine, but having several weeks in a row of not being given water will affect the organs, and they'll just keel over and die. So it's worth it to find a good breeder and to get a captive bred.
Such as yourself, of course.
It's breeding time. He's going to be busy here in a few weeks.
Can you tell us a little bit about the availability of what you have in case some members are interested in getting?
I still have babies from a few of these guys from last year that I'm still working on selling. The Eastern Indigos sell very, very quickly, so I don't have any of those left. But I have a few examples of just about everything else. Blacktail Cribos are the cheapest of all of them. I don't know why. I think I need to raise my prices because they sell out very, very quickly as well. But I have a handful of yellowtails left, a handful of Texans, a handful of really
You have Texas?
all of them. And then, I'll be expecting a whole other crop of them shortly. So the only other, I've shown you 5. The other one I actually don't have an adult example to show you, and that's the Mexican red-tail indigo. And they are native to the west coast of Mexico. They actually have a very large range up and down that west coast of Mexico. And even though they're called red-tail indigos, they actually don't have red tails. I don't know why they have that name, but they are generally speaking black on the top, just as black as an Eastern indigo, but rather than having a black belly, they tend to have a lighter belly, and it'll be white. And so I know the DeGroofs over here have one that I sold them here this year, and I brought a baby to kind of show and pass around. But they're kind of neat as well. they're not nearly as well represented in the pet trade. If there are any that are less common, it's these guys. So this is this year's baby. That sort of grayish blue color on the top and on the back is gonna turn black. This is an inky jet black. And that white on the stomach is going to stay. So it's going to be a white and black animal when it grows up. So, you know, this is a baby. He's a couple months old and he eats very well on baby mice. And so this is the Mexican red-tailed indigo. So I tend to sell a lot of these to people that come to me wanting Eastern indigos. The Eastern indigos are just so much more well-known. But the issues with the inbreeding and the legality of buying and selling them and whatever else tend to push people towards these quite a bit. So these are fun snakes.
Now, how many species are in Mexico, of, let's say, of that genus?
Texans, Mexican redtails, blacktails, unicolors. There's also a new one that's been described around Veracruz that is Arizabensis. And there are people in the U.S. that claim to have them. I haven't really seen them yet, but I don't know that there are really any in the U.S. outside of a few people claiming it.
So they basically do choose habitats everywhere in Mexico, right?
Yes.
From the north all the way to...
And what's interesting about the Veracruz area, and if I were in a different life situation without a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old kid and single and can go anywhere I want with, in the world and with my life, I would be studying the Drymarchon in that Veracruz area. For those of you who don't know, Veracruz is sort of on the east coast, but right in the middle of Mexico. And what you have is along the east coast coming up from the south, you've got the black-tailed Cribos. Coming down from the north, you have Texas indigos. Coming sort of in, because it's kind of an L-shaped, reverse L-shaped range, are the Mexican red-tailed indigos, and they all kind of stop right around Veracruz, which is right where Arizabensis was described. So I don't know, I don't recall exactly what they used to describe Arizabensis and to differentiate it from the others, but it's kind of an interesting area because you have this, the range of several different Drymarchon species all in a close geographic area. So,
Have you heard of any natural occurrences in hybrids or in integrate?
I have not.
No.
I have not. I hear rumors here and there of captive breeders breeding a yellowtail with a Texan and crazy things like that. And, I have yet to see photographs or see like any kind of proof of captive breedings. As far as wild-caught hybrids or integrades or things like that, outside of blacktails and unicolors, which we kind of covered that, I haven't heard anything like that. Really, the ranges don't quite touch in really anything other than blacktails and unicolors. They get close in that Veracruz area, but not quite. Generally speaking, as far as the pet trade goes, as far as the people that breed them, hybrids are very, very frowned upon. People in the indigo community are very purist, and they like to see animals the way they would exist in the wild. And that's just sort of the culture of the community there. So, anyway, any last questions? Well, a few. Yes, ma'am.
How big a cage do these things need?
Good question also. They're obviously large
I
snakes
just
that
have
are
little
active.
things, so I'm fascinated by
Yeah.
each animal.
Yeah, they actually don't need huge cages, and in general, snakes in captivity need smaller cages than you might think, given that they have nature's playground at their disposal when they're in the wild. But generally speaking, with my adults, I keep them in a rack system, which for those of you, I'm sure most of you are familiar, but for those of you that aren't familiar, they're big tubs that fit into shelves, so that they don't have lids or whatever else. The top of the shelf covers them. And for me, with the quantity of animals I have, it's much easier for cleaning because I can take the snake out, I can dump the rack the tub into a trash can, wipe it down very quickly, sanitize it, and put it back very quickly, whereas a cage, I can get in there and do the whole thing. But with that being said, The racks that I use are Vision racks, which are made here in the valley. The tub size is 40 inches by 30 inches.
And the B70?
I'm sorry?
Not the B70?
No, not the 70s. They're Vision boa racks.
Oh,
So the tubs are like this, and they're very sturdy. They're very thick. They're pretty heavy on their own, and that's as small as I would keep an adult in. And if you do the math, so then that's 1,200 inches of square inches of space, which is roughly the equivalent to most of the 4x2 cages that you can see for sale. And that's about as small as I would go. Some people keep them in 6 foot by 2 foot cages, but you know, I've done that before, and I find that they sit in the corner the whole time. You know, and they'll occasionally get out and crawl around a little bit, but they'll sit in the corner the whole time. You know, I don't know. So, but they're happy, they're healthy, and the setup that I have them in, they produce well, and everything works out. So,
Do all yellowtail tend to be that excitable, or is it just this one?
on average, well, he's tame. I mean, he's active, but he's tame. I mean, he's bitten me before, but really only if I really hassle him. Generally speaking, you know, an aggressive yellowtail Cribo is not going to want to come out of his cage. And once you get him out, they just tend to flap around a bit and are pretty wild, but they're not going to bite you at that point unless you really restrict their movement and grab them. So really, once you get them out and you're moving and you're flowing them through their hands, they really aren't going to bite you. But you know, when you go in, if you go into the cage and you know come at them, they can defend themselves. But I learned on the hard way with my nose that I don't go into any of my snakes' cages, no matter how tame they are, without a cage hook. I open up the tub with the hook. I have a long 4-foot hook. I use the hook to open the tub. I look in there from a distance. I use the hook to reach in and pull the snake out, and I grab the back half of the body, and at that point, the feeding response is gone. And the snake is ready to hang out, and everyone's happy, no matter how, you know, aggressive they are, even the yellowtail. So I've kept some snakes over the years where they don't turn off their feeding response. Rosy boas and Taiwan beauty snakes and whatever. If they feel flesh, they're going to eat it no matter what it's going to be. But anyway, so, and I know we have some other Drymarchon over here that are, you know, youngsters. There's a baby and a couple yearlings there if we want to check them out. But we don't have any other questions.
What age do you start to feed them once a week as opposed to every 4?
Every 4 or 5 days. I guess we didn't talk about feeding schedule, but I did mention they have faster metabolism. So generally speaking, I'm feeding the snakes every 4 or 5 days. Really, when I back off on once a week, it's when they're adult size. And it's more important with males than it is with females. Females put a lot of their energy into egg production and whatever else, so it's hard to get a regular egg-laying female obese. So every 4 or 5 days is fine with that, but the males will get obese. If you're feeding an adult male too much and it's not going to grow any longer, it's just going to start growing fatter. And you know, because they're not putting any energy into egg production, they can get obese. And once you get them obese, you know, it's really hard to get them to slim down. I've tried. I had an adult. I got one as a blacktail as an adult, the father of that one there, and I can't get that snake to lose weight. You know, it's tough for everybody. The other aspect of all this that I really enjoy is the kind of the business side of it all. You know, the marketing and sales and all that sort of thing. I was a finance major coming out of school, and you know, I use it in my 5th grade classroom. I'm a 5th grade teacher, next to nothing. But anyway, it's all supply and demand, really. So the cheapest of all these, the yellowtails, the blacktails, I sell for $350 a baby, and the Eastern Indigos are $1,000. And the Mexican red tails, because really no one has them, there are only a couple people in the U.S. that have them. I sell those for more like $1,200. So you know, if it's like anything else in business, if someone will pay that price, I'll sell it for that price, kind of a thing. So you know, it's supply and demand like anything else, and species sort of has their own little market. You know, people that are interested in them, and some people want to have one of each or a pair of each, and some people only want one, not the others. And so. My general protocol is I don't want to see, I want to see the babies that I sell make it and be well cared for. And as we mentioned earlier, the babies can be tough when they're first born. So I generally like to get my babies fully feeding aggressively on unscented rodents before I send them to a buyer. It's not as much about size or age as it is about feeding. And when I go into their cage and they immediately perk up and they start huffing and puffing and poking at anything that moves in their cage because they want to kill and eat whatever they see, that's when I know they're ready for a new home.
Oh, good.
You know? But if I throw a mouse in there and they don't want to touch it, I don't want to give that burden to somebody else. Because, and, you know, some people are more experienced than others, but you know, I don't want to have someone buy a snake for me and then in a month or two say, hey, this thing won't eat. You know,
Yeah.
not only is it a headache for me, but it's not good for the animal. You know, those snakes will die and whatever else. It's a problem. So that's generally my thing, and it depends. Some snakes are ready to sell at 1 month old. Some snakes at 6 months old. It kind of just depends on how long it takes them to get going. Oh, yeah, Barry.
Have you ever had some of these Drymarchons where you could not get them onto rodents and they had to stick with, say, chicks, or they stuck with fish and that was it, and you had to sell the snake with that disclaimer?
I've never had to. It's just a question of time and patience. You know, yeah. Again, it might take me 6 months.
Okay, but they'll always convert.
But you know, sometimes I'll have someone come along who has dealt with, bred, and cared for Drymarchon for a long time, and I know they're capable, and they don't mind the challenge, and I'll sell them as is. You know, but if I'm confident that the person who I'm selling to is up to the task and is aware of the feeding status, then I'll do that sometimes. But the sort of general protocol is to just wait till they're totally established and bulletproof before I send them off somewhere else.
What is the ratio on the substrate that you use, pine versus?
I don't have a number. It's just sort of I feel. I mean, I pretty much put in the shavings first and put enough shavings in there as if you would just use that alone, and then I sprinkle in the pellets on top of that and sort of coat the top. Not even coat the top. It's really just a sprinkling in there. It's really heavy. It's you know, and I don't want to have a ton of it in there, just enough to soak up whatever you know the fluid is in there. So. What else?
You talked about supplementation towards the beginning of the talk.
Right, right.
You know, it's not really talked about much with snakes because being rodents. So what kind of supplements do you use?
I wish I could give you a more exact answer. It's the secret formula. No, but it's kind of a concoction that we kind of put together. It's not anything that we buy, but it's based off of some of the stuff that they've used in the zoos to feed amphibians. But there's fish stuff in there. There's my partner can tell you a lot more about it than I do. And then we mix in calcium on top of that for the females and whatever else. But my general thing is, particularly when we're getting close to breeding season, is that I'll buy veggie capsules and I'll pack the powder in the veggie capsules. I'll make my own little pills, and I take the pills and I put them down the mouth of a pre-killed chick, and I feed that to the snake, and they digest the veggie capsules just fine. And we found that when we started using the supplements very heavily, that not only the snakes grow better, they look better, but the fertility rates in the clutches went way up, noticeably up. So, and again, it kind of comes back to the whole philosophy of, you know, feed them what they get in the wild. You know, that these animals are hardwired to eat certain types of things in the wild, and if you're giving them white lab rats for their whole life, they can live and they can be happy, but they're not really getting what they were born to eat. And so I'm a firm believer in the more variance you can give, the better. And the reason why we do the supplements is that you just, it's, you can't vary it that much when you have as many as we have. I mean, there are only so many dead rattlesnakes I find on the road. I have 25, 30 adults at my house, and my partner has the same amount. You can't work that into the regular rotation. So for me, the default feeding is a rat, a chick, with supplements. And then if I've got a fish or a snake or a lizard or something that I'm confident is parasite-free, I'll throw that in there. But that's just kind of sporadic. In an ideal world, I'd give a frog, a lizard, a fish, a bird, and whatever, I come across and keep them all fat and happy that way. But, it's just not logistically feasible. So.
Why don't you just pick up a trout at Ralph's?
People do it. People do it, honestly. I mean, I'm really not exaggerating when I say they will eat anything. Like, I'll feed them catfish fillets. You go to Ralph's and you just buy catfish and you cut it into long strips. They love it. Tilapia, when I go to Troutdale, up off of Canaan, I'll take my kids up there fishing and whatever. You got to pay for all the fish you catch, and it's $7 or $8 a fish, whatever. But if there's a dead one floating in the water, whatever, I'll ask the guy, hey, can I take that home for free? Indigo food. Yeah, anything.
Are they prone to any specific disease?
Any specific one?
Disease or?
No, there's no IBD or anything like that. They're not particularly prone to respiratory infections or anything like that, which are common to some of the bovids. The only thing that I ran across, there was a period of time where I was supplementing their diet with chicken necks. I would just go to the local carniceria and buy a big box of frozen chicken necks. And after feeding those for a while, I found that there was a little bit of regurgitation here and there, some odd poops here and there, and it was salmonella. It was just, they are what they eat kind of a thing. So I stopped that quickly and kind of focused more on the lab stuff. So it's kind of tempting when you keep an indigo to just start throwing whatever at it, because it's kind of fun. But you have to watch what you put in there. But outside of my bout with salmonella with them, which really I just stopped feeding it to them and it just passed. It was fine. I haven't really had any issues. So anyway, I don't want to keep the whole group for much longer. If you have more questions, feel free to come on up and chat and check out these younger guys over here. And thank you.
Thank you.